It's been a really tough week for Sukuna fans, so if you know one, give them a hug, give them a kiss. They need your emotional support right now because they are going through a lot. Personally, I watched week after week after week as everyone trolled Gojo, and I can't lie, I almost sold my Gojo stocks when it looked like it was Gojo van, but that isn't the case. By the way, this video is going to cover chapter 2 to 8 and 2 to 9. The timestamps will be in the description or wherever it is on YouTube these days, so you can watch whichever one you want. So let's pick up where we stopped.
Let's go!
At chapter 2 to 7, we saw Gojo turn his domain into the size of a ball, which left us wondering what happened. Well, here we get some insight. Basically, once you're in a closed domain, which is what most domains are, you can't simply escape as it is resistant to attacks on the inside. Kusukabe explains further, saying that there are limits to the size of a domain because if you try to create a barrier too small to hold yourself and your opponent, it collapses. And that's when Choso says, the prison realm. It was in that exact moment we realized Gojo learned from a terrible experience. He learned from his time in the prison realm how to make a barrier that is small because it enhances your techniques inside your domain. Kusukabe then wonders how Sukuna and Gojo specifically change the conditions of their barriers every time they are using them because domain barriers typically have a set of internal and external conditions. He says every sorcerer discovers their own blend of parameters to establish their respective domains, except people like Hikari and Higuruma because their techniques require their domains to be open while they are using them. We switch back to the barrier and see it's holding up. We then realize Sukuna reduced his domain's range to increase the cursed technique output, essentially replicating Gojo's method. Then Kusukabe states that if both barriers close in a stalemate, Gojo will lose. We start to see the domain rigorously vibrate, but it doesn't shatter like before, and to everyone's surprise, it's actually holding up this time. Then it suddenly shatters with Gojo jumping back while the shrine is still standing. You know, this was a moment of fear for all of us, but Sukuna is staggering and the shrine suddenly collapses too. We then get a close-up of Sukuna and he is bleeding profusely. Gojo's technique is finally working. That's when we find out that Sukuna managed to destroy Gojo's domain from the outside, but Gojo damaged him to the point where he couldn't maintain his own domain. Kusukabe coins that since their domains have been dissipated, they should no longer be able to use their curse techniques. But remember, Gojo can use reverse curse technique to restore his curse technique. However, he made a mistake of showing that in battle because, as explained by Hana, Kenjaku only demonstrated the intricacies of splitting his soul into cursed objects to Sukuna on a singular occasion, but he was able to replicate it seamlessly after that one-time event, meaning he can most likely replicate this technique too and heal his burnt-out technique. Now keep this in mind as we move forward. Then we switch back to the two as they continue to brawl, and something dawns on Gojo. He realizes Sukuna has been avoiding using any of his other powers such as the 10 shadow technique and the unknown fireball jutsu he used against Jogo and to kill Mahoraga. Sukuna had only been using domain amplification to hit Gojo rather than to do something like summon Mahoraga or any of the 10 shadows for that matter. Gojo goes on to explain how he had the upper hand in the domain for 3 minutes, but Sukuna didn't use any of the 10 shadows despite having all of Megumi's memories, meaning that he knows he can use them but he chose not to use them. Then that's when we reach the end of chapter 2 to 8 to see the 8-handed wheel. And as a Gojo fan myself, this got me shook because one, Mahoraga was probably in the shadows for a while and Gojo couldn't detect him, or my second theory, which is he brought out Mahoraga in that moment to join the fight. And even though my first theory is worse, both scenarios are unfavorable, and if couldn't get any worse, Gojo has a nosebleed and the chapter ends. To save you all from the cliffhanger I endured, we'll begin chapter 2 to 9 right now. But first, if you're enjoying the video thus far, consider dropping a like, subscribing, and let us know if you're team Sukuna or team Gojo. Anyways, let's begin with chapter 2 to 9. So chapter 2 to 9 starts off with so much energy. Gojo is seen wiping the blood off his nostrils with that outlandish ass face, and he is entering the 1 billionth domain battle with King Sukuna.
Oh my god, bro.
Oh hell no, man. What the fuck, man?
Which proves that Sukuna can use reverse curse technique to heal his technique as stated earlier. Kusukabe explains that since it takes 3 minutes for Sukuna to destroy Gojo's domain, Gojo has to beat his ass so bad that he can't keep up the domain. And boy, Gojo is ready to fuck someone up. The fight starts and Gojo starts pummeling Sukuna. He doesn't even give him any breathing space. Sukuna tries to jump away, but Gojo uses his technique to crash him into the shrine yet again. And before Sukuna can even hit the floor, Gojo just appears there and punches him so hard that the shrine is completely destroyed, with half of Sukuna's face blown right off. And now, even after leaving the domain, he hits Sukuna into a nearby pole and they throw their hands up again for another domain expansion. At this point, I was just tired of the domain expansion spamming, but Yuta said something. He said Gojo opened his domain 0.1 seconds earlier than Sukuna because he was too busy healing his wounds. And now, ladies and gentlemen, Unlimited Void landed and Gojo rips out Sukuna's heart.
I'm gonna come. Oh.
It is stated here that after 2 minutes 40 seconds, the malevolent shrine collapsed and Gojo's domain was triumphant. Now Gojo rushes him and says, "I'm not done yet. Crushing your heart was the bare minimum, nigga. I want your lungs. I want your liver too." Bro, at this point he was just sounding like Venom. I'll bring you closer to death than Yuji was at the detention center. Look at this bomb Sukuna. Bro is just there helpless and incapacitated. As Gojo is about to finish the job, this big ass nigga Mahoraga pulls up. Gojo tries to use purple to kill it instantly, thinking it hasn't adapted to the Unlimited Void, but it just destroys Gojo's domain and we realize it's probably already adapted.
Yeah, it's something national, underground, underhouse, and I drop the ground. Like a million elephants, a silverback orangutan, you can't stop a train. You want some, don't